The first gunshot cracked so close to Eli Mercer's head that the world tilted, and in that single ringing moment, he understood with absolute clarity that Greywillow was trying to kill him. He stumbled sideways as splinters exploded from a stack of freshly cut cedar logs along the riverbank. The sharp scent of sap burst into the damp air, mixing with cordite and river mist. Eli's boots slipped on the slick wooden planks of the dock, and he barely caught himself before plunging into the dark, fast-moving water below. Another shot followed, then another too precise. Too calm to be a warning. These men wanted him finished. Greywillow was no dusty desert town like the ones Eli had known farther south. It crouched in the northern timberlands, where towering pines crowded the sky and the Snake Fork River cut through the land like a long, cold scar. The streets were plank and stone, always wet, always smelling of rain, moss, and sawdust. Logging cranes loomed like skeletons against the fog, and the mills never truly slept. Eli pressed himself against the logs, breath ragged, left arm burning where a bullet had torn through muscle. Blood soaked his sleeve, sticky and warm despite the cold air. He forced his shaking hand to stay steady as he checked his revolver. 3 rounds left. Not enough. Spread out. Someone shouted behind him. Boots thundered on the dock. The men hunting him knew the town. They knew every alley, every stair, every blind corner. Eli pushed off the logs and ran. He cut between the sawmill and the apothecary, boots slapping against stone slick with algae. Pain flared white-hot up his arm, but fear drove him forward. He could hear them now, heavy breaths, the creak of leather, the confidence of men who believed the end was already decided. The alley narrowed, then dead-ended at the back of the apothecary. Eli skidded to a stop, chest heaving, vision blurring. He turned, raising his revolver, and froze. A woman stood at the mouth of the alley holding a lantern. Its yellow light caught her face, sharp and composed, dark hair braided close beneath a wool hood. She looked to be around 30, dressed plainly in a thick coat, boots worn from real use. Her eyes flicked from Eli's bleeding arm to his gun, then to the shadows behind him. Instead of screaming, she snapped the lantern shutter closed. Darkness swallowed them. "You're going to die if you stay here," she said calmly. A shout echoed nearby, followed by hurried footsteps. Eli tried to answer, but dizziness surged and the alley tipped sideways. He sagged forward, the revolver slipping from his fingers. The woman caught him before he hit the ground. She was stronger than she looked. "Can you walk?" she asked, already shifting his weight over her shoulder. "I don't know," he muttered, teeth chattering despite the adrenaline. "That's fine." "I do." She hauled him to a narrow door behind the apothecary and shoved it open just as voices rounded the corner. They slipped inside, and she slammed the door shut, sliding a thick iron bolt into place. The space beyond was dim and cool, a stairwell leading down. She half dragged, half carried him into a cellar that smelled of dried herbs, alcohol, and earth. Jars lined the walls, labels written in neat, slanted script. She set him down against a crate just as boots pounded. Passed overhead? Eli's heart hammered so loudly he was sure the men would hear it. They didn't. Silence returned, broken only by the distant rush of the river and Ali's labored breathing. The woman lit a lamp and turned to him. "Sit still." "My name's Eli Mercer," he said weakly. "I didn't ask," she replied, already cutting away the blood-soaked fabric of his sleeve with a small, sharp knife. "And if you pass out, don't bleed on my floor." She cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency. Alcohol burned like fire, and Eli hissed, fingers clawing at the crate. Her hands never shook. "You some kind of doctor?" he asked. "No," she said. "I'm careful." He caught sight of a pale scar along her wrist and calluses on her palms, marks of work, not violence, but work that demanded toughness. This wasn't a woman who waited to be rescued. "Why help me?" Eli asked quietly. You don't know me. She met his gaze then, eyes dark and steady. I know the kind of men who chase someone through my town with guns drawn. And I know they don't usually deserve cooperation. Footsteps paused overhead. A voice muttered something about checking the river. The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice. Listen carefully. You are not staying here long. I won't make it across the river, Eli said. Not like this. She studied his face for a long moment, then sighed through her nose as if accepting an inconvenience. Then you're staying until morning. She wrapped his arm tightly, knotting the bandage with a tug that made him grunt. What's your name? He asked. Rowan Hawley. The name meant nothing to him then, but it would as she turned away. Eli's hand brushed the inside of his coat where the oilskin-wrapped ledger rested, heavy as guilt. Rowan noticed the movement. You're carrying something, she said. Something worth killing for. Eli didn't answer. Rowan didn't press. She poured herself a cup of water, then hesitated before speaking again. You can send me to your home if you want, she said to him. She said suddenly, voice quiet but firm. But right now, I'm deciding yours. And yours is here. Until the river forgets your name. Outside, the Snake Fork surged against its banks. Dark and restless, as if listening, Eli closed his eyes. The weight of the ledger pressing against his ribs, and wondered how many secrets a river could hold before it drowned everyone who touched them. Morning crept into the cellar without permission, a thin gray light seeping through the narrow window near the ceiling. Eli woke to pain first, then to the smell of damp earth and boiled herbs. His arm throbbed in time with his pulse, a deep, aching reminder that the night before had not been a fever dream. For a moment he lay still, listening to the river's distant rush, to the muted sounds of the town waking above him. No gunfire. No shouting. That alone felt like a small miracle. Rowan sat at the work table across the cellar, her back straight, shoulders squared beneath a thick sweater. She was grinding something with a mortar and pestle, the steady scrape filling the quiet. She hadn't braided her hair yet. It fell loose around her shoulders, dark and slightly damp, as if she'd washed it recently. She didn't look at him when she spoke. You slept through the worst of it. Eli shifted, wincing. Worst of what? Your fever. She poured the ground herbs into a pot, added water, and set it over a small burner. You shook hard for about an hour. Said some things that didn't make sense. Did I give anything away? She glanced over her shoulder then, one eyebrow lifting. If you did, I wouldn't tell you. He tried to sit up and failed, teeth clenching as pain flared through his arm and shoulder. Rowan crossed the cellar in 2 strides and pushed him back down with a firm hand to his chest. Don't, she said. You tore muscle. You're lucky it missed bone. Lucky's not the word I'd use. She snorted quietly and returned to her pot. You're alive. That counts for something. Eli watched her move, efficient and unhurried, as if men bleeding in her cellar were an everyday inconvenience. In the lamplight, he noticed the faint shadows beneath her eyes, the tension she carried in her shoulders. She hadn't slept much, if at all. How long do I have before they come back? He asked. Rowan poured the steaming liquid into a cup and brought it to him. They already did. His grip tightened on the blanket. When? Just before dawn. 2 of them. Asked if I'd seen anyone matching your description. Her mouth flattened. They weren't polite. And? I told them the river brings strangers through all the time. Most don't stay. She held the cup to his lips. Drink. The tea was bitter and smoky, but warmth spread through him as he swallowed. They believe you? They didn't, she said evenly. But they don't have proof. Not yet. Eli closed his eyes. The ledger felt heavier by the hour, a silent promise of violence. He reached beneath the blanket, fingers brushing the oilskin-wrapped book. Rowan noticed, of course. She always noticed. You going to tell me now? She asked. Or do I have to wait until they're kicking down my door? He exhaled slowly. It's a ledger. Names. Payments. Shipments that don't exist on paper. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Silas, yes. The name seemed to settle into the cellar like smoke. Silas Creech owned the mills, the docks, the ferry, half the town's livelihood and all of its fear. Men crossed the street when he passed, not out of respect but survival. Rowan didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said, "Show me." Eli hesitated only a second before handing it over. Rowan took the ledger with care, as if it might bite. She flipped through the pages slowly, eyes scanning line after line. Her breathing changed shorter. Tighter. She stopped. Her finger hovered over a name, Thomas Hawley. The color drained from her face, leaving it pale and sharp. She read the line again, then the one beneath it. Eli watched her throat work as she swallowed. That's not... Her voice faltered, then hardened. That's not possible. I wish it were, Eli said quietly. She closed the ledger with a soft but final motion and pressed it against the table, palms flat on either side. My brother drowned, she said. The river took him. That's what they said? The ledger says he was paid to interfere with a shipment, Eli replied, and then paid again to stay quiet. And then he stopped. And then what? She demanded. And then there's a note. Resolved. Rowan's hands curled into fists. For a moment Eli thought she might break something or him. Instead, she straightened slowly, every movement controlled. How did you get this? She asked. I was hired to deliver it, Eli said. Didn't know what it was at first. By the time I did, it was too late to pretend otherwise. Too late to walk away, she murmured. Double quotes, yes. Silence stretched between them, thick and charged. Above them, the town creaked and stirred. Somewhere a bell rang. Life going on as if nothing had changed. Rowan finally spoke. You plan to take this to the marshal? Eli shook his head. Marshal answers to Silas. Judge? But. She let out a breath that trembled despite her effort to control it. Then you've signed your own death warrant. Already did, Eli said. Now I'm trying to make it mean something. Rowan turned away, pacing the length of the cellar. If this gets out, she said, the mills will shut down. Men will lose work. Families will starve. And if it doesn't, Eli countered, more men like Thomas will die and get called accidents. She stopped. The name hung between them. Rowan rubbed a hand over her face. When she looked at him again, her eyes were wet but fierce. There's a ferry that runs north, she said, across the river toward the high timber. If we cross before noon, we might lose them. We? Eli echoed. She met his gaze squarely. This ledger has my brother's blood on it. You don't carry that alone. The decision settled between them, heavy and irrevocable. They moved quickly. Rowan packed supplies with the precision of someone used to leaving in a hurry. Bandages, food, a small revolver she tucked into her coat. She helped Eli into a clean shirt, her hands brisk but careful. When they stepped outside, Greywillow looked deceptively peaceful. Mist curled off the river, softening the edges of buildings and cranes. Men went about their work, heads down. No one met Rowan's eyes. The ferry lay moored at the dock, its wooden deck slick with moisture. The ferryman nodded to Rowan, barely sparing Eli a glance. Halfway across, a shout rang out. Rowan turned just as a rifle cracked from the shore. The ferryman jerked, a dark bloom spreading across his chest, and fell without a sound. The ferry lurched, poles slipping from his grasp. Eli swore and grabbed for it, pain screaming through his arm. Rowan moved at the same time, muscles straining as she shoved the pole into the riverbed and pushed. Bullets splintered wood. Water erupted around them. "Don't stop," Eli shouted. "I wasn't planning to," Rowan snapped. The current caught them, dragging the ferry sideways. Another shot tore through the railing inches from Rowan's hand. She grit her teeth and pushed harder, breath coming in sharp bursts. The far bank loomed closer, mud, roots, shadowed trees. With a final shove, the ferry scraped against the shore. Eli leapt, nearly collapsing as his boots hit solid ground. Rowan followed, hauling the ledger and their supplies after her. They didn't look back. They ran into the forest as gunfire faded behind them, the river roaring its fury at their heels. Eli's lungs burned, his vision narrowing, but Rowan kept pace, her grip firm when he stumbled. When they finally stopped, deep among the pines, both were gasping, soaked, and shaking. Rowan leaned against a tree, chest heaving. "You still with me?" she asked. Eli nodded, forcing a crooked smile. "Guess I am." She looked at him for a long moment, then glanced down at the ledger tucked beneath her coat. "Then we finish this," she said. Fort Thomas. Above them, the forest stood silent and watchful, and the river's secrets flowed on behind them, no longer content to stay buried. The forest swallowed them whole within minutes, the sound of the river fading into a distant, angry memory. Pines rose thick and close, their needles blotting out the sky, the ground soft with rot and old rain. Eli leaned heavily on Rowan as they pushed uphill, every step sending pain slicing through his arm and down into his ribs. He tried not to slow her, but his body betrayed him again and again. They didn't stop until Rowan decided they would. She pulled him beneath a tangle of fallen branches and fern, crouching low, listening. Eli's breath rasped loud in his ears. He tasted iron. Behind them, far off, a shout echoed. Then another. Dogs this time, short, sharp barks that carried too well through the trees. Rowan closed her eyes briefly, jaw tightening. "Silas doesn't waste time." "No," Eli said hoarsely. "He wastes people." She tore a strip from her underskirt and retied the bandage on his arm, pulling hard enough to make him groan. "You need to stay upright," she said. "If you lie down, you won't get back up." That's a comforting thought. She almost smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. They moved again, slower now, winding along a narrow game trail Rowan seemed to know by instinct. The land here rose and fell in steep, uneven ridges, slick with moss. Once Eli slipped and went down hard. Rowan hauled him up without a word, her strength fueled by something sharper than fear. As the hours passed, the forest changed. The air grew colder, thinner. Old logging scars appeared, rotting stumps, rusted chains half swallowed by earth. A forgotten watchtower rose ahead, skeletal against the gray sky. Rowan stopped short. "We can't go around," she said. "They'll flank us." Eli followed her gaze. Smoke curled faintly from beyond the ridge. "Someone's there," he said. "Someone always is," she replied. "Question is who?" They approached cautiously. The structure beyond was an abandoned ranger station, its windows broken, roof sagging. Smoke drifted from a stone chimney that shouldn't have drawn anymore. Rowan motioned Eli down and circled wide. Minutes stretched. Eli waited, revolver heavy in his good hand, heart pounding. When Rowan finally waved him forward, relief hit hard enough to make his knees weak. Inside, the station smelled of damp wood and old ash. A single man stood by the stove, hands raised not in surrender, but in acknowledgement. "Easy," he said. "I'm not with Silas." Rowan didn't lower her gun. "That's what everyone says." The man was older, beard gray, coat patched, and worn thin. His eyes flicked to Eli's bandaged arm and softened. "You're hurt." "So I've been told," Eli said. The man nodded. "Name's Calder. I used to keep the northern lines before Silas bought the roots." Rowan stiffened. Bought? Blackmailed, Calder corrected. Then buried what didn't cooperate. Rowan exchanged a look with Eli. You know what he's doing, she said. Calder's mouth twisted. I know enough to know you won't outrun him long. Eli eased himself onto a bench. We don't need to outrun him. We need witnesses. Calder studied him, then the ledger peeking from Rowan's coat. His eyes widened. You carrying proof? Rowan nodded once. Calder exhaled slowly. Then you picked the wrong quiet town. Before Eli could respond, a rifle cracked outside. The window exploded inward. Rowan fired back without hesitation, glass raining across the floor. They've got our trail, Calder shouted. Dogs, too. Rowan grabbed the ledger, thrust it into Eli's coat. If this goes wrong, it won't, Eli cut in, though his voice wavered. Gunfire tore through the station. Wood splintered. Smoke filled the air, sharp and choking. Calder dropped to one knee, clutching his side. Go. He barked. I'll slow them. Rowan hesitated only a second, then hauled Eli toward the back door. You don't owe us this, she said. Calder smiled grimly. I owe Thomas. The name hit Rowan like a blow, but there was no time. She pulled Eli into the trees as the station erupted in chaos behind them. They ran until Eli couldn't feel his arm at all. Night fell hard and cold. They hid in a narrow ravine, the earth damp and unforgiving. Rowan checked Eli's wound by moonlight, her hands trembling now despite her effort to steady them. You're getting worse, she said. I'll live. She looked at him sharply. Don't lie to me. He met her gaze. I won't die before this is finished. She pressed her forehead briefly to his shoulder, the gesture gone almost as soon as it came. Thomas hated unfinished things, she said quietly. Couldn't leave a knot untied or a door unlocked? Eli swallowed. He sounds like a good man. He was, Rowan said. That's why Silas killed him. At dawn they moved again, this time toward Greywillow. Eli stared at her when he realized. Back? She nodded. Running only proves we're afraid. Silas rules because no one says his name out loud. You're talking about confronting him. I'm talking about making him impossible to protect. They skirted the river, using the fog to their advantage. As Greywillow came back into view, Eli felt a strange calm settle over him. Fear gave way to purpose. The docks were already busy. Men shouted orders, chains clanked, saws screamed. Life grinding on. Rowan stepped onto the planks like she belonged there. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Silas stood near the mill office, tall and immaculate, coat spotless despite the mud. When he saw them, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Rowan Hawley, he called pleasantly. I wondered how long before grief turned into foolishness. She didn't slow. You killed my brother. Silas sighed. Thomas made choices. So did you, Eli said, stepping forward. And now everyone will know. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Silas's gaze flicked to Eli's coat, calculating. You think words will save you? No, Rowan said. But truth might. She pulled the ledger free and held it high. For a heartbeat. Greywillow held its breath. Silas's smile vanished, and for the first time since Thomas drowned, Rowan felt the river shift, its secrets rising, heavy and unstoppable, toward the surface. The ledger felt heavier than iron in Rowan's hands as the crowd pressed closer, boots creaking on wet planks, breath fogging the cold air. Greywillow had never been quiet, but now the noise thinned into something sharper: anticipation, fear, the fragile sound of people realizing they might be standing at the edge of a moment that could not be undone. Silas recovered first. He always did. He lifted one hand, calm as a man soothing a horse, and the men nearest him stilled. This is nonsense, he said smoothly. Grief makes people reckless. Rowan Halley lost her brother to the river and found someone willing to sell her a story. Rowan's chest tightened, but she did not lower the ledger. You paid him, she said, her voice carrying farther than she expected. You paid Thomas to keep quiet about your shipments. And when he wouldn't, you marked him resolved. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Someone swore softly. A dockhand stepped back as if the planks beneath Silas's boots had turned hot. Silas laughed, light and dismissive. You expect these men to believe you over me? Eli stepped forward then, his face pale but set. He took the ledger from Rowan and opened it, flipping to a page already worn thin from handling. Names, he said, reading aloud. Dates, amounts, bribes paid to the marshal, to the judge, to the ferrymaster who drowned last night because he knew too much. That landed hard. A woman near the edge of the crowd gasped. Drowned? Silas's eyes flicked toward the river, then back. You're bleeding, he said to Eli. You're in no condition to lie? Eli finished. You taught me better than that. That did it. The murmur swelled into anger, sharp and ugly. Men who had lost wages to unexplained mill shutdowns, women who had buried sons after accidents that never sat. Right faces hardened as understanding dawned. Rowan's voice cut through it all. Thomas Halley wasn't the first, she said, and he wouldn't have been the last. Silas's hand drifted toward his coat. Rowan saw it. Eli saw it. So did the marshal, standing stiffly at the edge of the crowd, sweat beading at his temples. Don't, the marshal said hoarsely. Silas turned slowly. You forget who keeps this town alive. No, the marshal replied. I forget who I was before you. The moment shattered. Hands grabbed Silas's arms, rough and sudden. He fought, shouting promises and threats, but the crowd surged, fueled by something long denied. When the irons snapped closed around his wrists, the sound rang louder than any gunshot. Silas's gaze found Rowan's one last time, cold and venomous. You think this ends it? She met his stare without flinching. I think it begins telling the truth. They took him away then, down the dock and toward the lockup that had never once held him. The crowd slowly dispersed, voices low and stunned, as if the town itself were unsure how to stand without his shadow. Only when the last of them were gone did. Rowan's hands began to shake. Eli caught the ledger as it slipped from her grip and set it gently on a crate. You did it, he said. We did. She corrected automatically and then swayed. He was there instantly, steadying her, the pain in his arm forgotten. Sit, he urged. They sat together on the edge of the dock, boots dangling above the dark water. For a long while, neither spoke. The river rushed past, indifferent and eternal. I kept thinking. Rowan said finally that if I dug deep enough, I'd find some sense in it. A reason he died. Eli watched the water. Sometimes there isn't one. Sometimes it's just men choosing wrong and calling it fate. She nodded slowly. Thomas hated that word. I know, Eli said, surprising himself with how certain he felt. Winter crept in fast after that. Snow replaced rain, blanketing the forest and softening the sharp edges of Greywillow. The mills shut down for a week, then reopened under new hands. The marshal resigned. A judge from upriver arrived with questions and warrants, and for once, no one interfered. Eli stayed. At first, it was necessity. His arm needed time, his strength slow to return. Rowan changed his bandages each morning, her touch careful, her presence steady. They spoke little of the night on the dock, but it lived between them, unspoken and understood. Some evenings they walked along the river, breath puffing white in the cold. Rowan told him stories about Thomas, how he laughed too loud, how he fixed things that weren't broken just to see how they worked. Eli listened, carrying those pieces with a quiet reverence. One night, As snow began to fall in earnest, Rowan stopped at the bend where the current slowed and the water darkened. "This is where they said he slipped," she said. Eli followed her gaze. "Do you believe that anymore?" She thought for a long moment. "I believe he didn't fall alone," she said. "And I believe he'd be furious if I let that be the end of him." Eli reached for her hand without thinking. She didn't pull away. By spring, Greywillow felt different. Lighter, in ways that were hard to name. Rowan expanded the apothecary, turning the back room into a place where men could come without fear of debt or silence. Eli helped where he could, hauling supplies, fixing shelves. Learning the rhythms of a town, finally learning how to breathe. One evening, as the river swelled with meltwater, Rowan stood in the doorway watching the current. "You could leave," she said, not looking at him. "No one would stop you." Eli leaned against the frame. "I know." She nodded. "You always were honest." "So are you," he replied. "You just don't announce it." She smiled faintly at that, then turned to face him. "You can send me to your home if you want," she said to him. She repeated softly. The words changed now, gentler. "But I think this might already be one." Eli felt something settle in his chest, warm and certain. "I was hoping you'd say that." They stood together as the river rushed on, no longer hiding what it carried, and for the first time since Greywillow learned how deep its secrets ran. The water felt less like a threat and more like a promise kept.